In the dimly lit hospital room where the steady rhythm of machines echoed like a fragile heartbeat of time itself, the old man lay motionless, his frail hands resting upon the thin blanket, his eyes half closed as though caught between the world he knew and the one waiting beyond. The night shift had stretched longer than usual, and despite the hours, the young caregiver named Alina refused to let exhaustion dull her spirit, for she had promised herself that every patient under her care would, at least once in their final days, feel the warmth of someone truly present, someone who saw them not as a hospital file but as a human being with memories, battles, regrets, and dreams that once soared. Tonight, she noticed the old man trembling slightly, not from the cold but from the quiet terror of loneliness, and she instinctively reached out, placing her soft hand over his, whispering, "It's okay. I'm here, you're not alone," words that melted into the air with comforting sincerity before she gently sat beside him, lifting his shoulders so he could rest against her as she hummed a tune she had learned from her mother, the kind of lullaby that had once soothed her as a child and still carried the power to calm a restless soul. At first the old man simply breathed, weak and shallow, but then his lips parted, and he murmured, "No one has sung to me in decades. I almost forgot what kindness feels like," and Alina, with tears she tried to hide, whispered back, "Kindness never forgets us, it only waits for the right moment to return," unaware that at the very door to the room, a young man in an expensive navy suit stood frozen in silence, his chest tightening at the sight before him, his eyes struggling to comprehend how this gentle caregiver was offering his father more human warmth in 5 minutes than he himself had managed to give in years. This man, Ethan Ward, was known across the business world as a ruthless millionaire, someone who made empires rise and fall before breakfast, a man who had been hardened by corporate wars, wealth, and fame, but none of those limitations compared to the unspoken regret he carried regarding his relationship with his father, a relationship that had grown colder with every business trip, every missed holiday, every broken promise. And now standing there unseen, he watched the caregiving scene unfold like an emotional strike to the core of his soul. The soft melody Alina sang wrapped the room in a tenderness that Ethan had long forgotten existed, her voice so gentle, so full of love for someone she was not even related to, that he felt almost ashamed of the life he had chosen over family. And as she stroked his father's thinning hair, he saw the old man slowly open his eyes and whisper, "You have a beautiful heart," to which Alina smiled and replied, "It's easy to care for people who remind me of my own father. I lost him years ago, but I promised myself I'd treat every elderly patient with the love I wish someone had given him." And though Ethan wanted to step forward right then, to apologize, to thank her, to do something, anything, his feet refused to move, trapped between guilt and revelation. He watched instead as she gently fed his father warm soup, wiping the corners of his mouth with delicate care, listened to her ask about his childhood stories, and even though the old man struggled to form sentences, she waited patiently for every word as though it were precious gold. And in that moment Ethan realized that the wealth he possessed, mansions, diamonds, cars, prestige, meant absolutely nothing if he had failed at the most basic human duty, to love. Overwhelmed, he took a step back, leaning against the wall in the hallway, taking shaky breaths he never allowed himself to feel, remembering every time his father had reached out, every time he had ignored or postponed responding because business felt more urgent. But as he watched Alina carefully place a warm blanket around his father and hum again to ease him into sleep, he felt the crushing guilt soften, not because he forgave himself, but because he saw hope, and that hope was her. Alina had unknowingly taught him a lesson he couldn't buy, couldn't negotiate, couldn't acquire through success: compassion. After several minutes he finally gathered the courage to step into the room, but before he could speak, the old man stirred and opened his eyes just long enough to mumble, "Son, she stays with me, she makes the darkness go away," and the words hit Ethan harder than any loss he had ever endured, and all he could do was nod, though his voice trembled. Alina turned, startled to see a well-dressed stranger standing there, but Ethan quickly introduced himself, his tone carrying both authority and vulnerability, saying, "I'm Ethan, his son, and I just want to thank you for being here, for doing what I should have done," which made Alina frown kindly as she whispered, "It's never too late to be present." And those simple words became the turning point of Ethan's life. From that night on, Ethan visited daily, watching silently as Alina cared for his father with the devotion of family. And with every passing moment he found himself drawn not only to her compassion but to her strength, her gentleness, her ability to offer light in places even the brightest money couldn't reach. She didn't know that the man watching her from the doorway each night was slowly rebuilding the broken pieces of his life through her presence, nor did she know that the millionaire she thought was just another worried son had already made a decision that would change her life forever. Weeks later, when his father had recovered enough to speak more clearly, Ethan walked up to Alina, his confidence for once not wrapped in arrogance but sincerity, and said, "You don't know this, but you changed my life the day I saw you hold my father, and I want to do something for you, not out of pity, not charity, but because people like you deserve the world to treat them the way they treat others." And though Alina shook her head humbly, refusing special treatment, Ethan simply smiled and said, "I'm not asking for permission. Some blessings are meant to be given." And from that moment onward, her life took a turn she had never imagined, though the full story was only just beginning, because sometimes, one act of kindness whispered into a quiet hospital room becomes the spark that changes two lives forever, one searching for redemption, the other never knowing she was the answer someone had been praying for. And if you felt this chapter touch your heart even a little, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because the next part of this emotional journey is going to move you even deeper, and you won't want to miss what happens next.